Hey, we're talking about adding and subtracting rational numbers in this video. This will be a review for many of you, just kind of a refresher as to what you covered in 5th grade, adding fractions. Stay tuned. Now, we just covered the LCM, which you should remember is an acronym for least common multiple. There's a reason why we went over the least common multiple. It's because it's the same thing as least common denominator, which you must know in order to do fractions when you add fractions with unlike denominators. So let's take a look at an example. Here we have two fractions that we're going to add, and they do not have a common denominator. So the very first thing we need to do is find a least common denominator. Now, since both of these denominators are prime, it actually makes our job pretty simple. What we need to do is just actually multiply these two prime numbers to find out what our least common denominator is. Here we need to actually find equivalent fractions. So as you can see, 3/5 is going to be multiplied by 3/3, which is the same thing as 1. 3 over 3 equals 1. And then 1/3 will be multiplied by 5 over 5, which again is the equivalency of 1. Once we do that step, we get 9/15 plus 5/15. And when we add them together, we're going to keep the denominator the same, and we are simply adding the numerator. Let's take a look at a second example in which we have two unlike denominators, and neither are prime numbers. So the very first thing I'm going to do, actually prior to finding the least common denominator, is convert this from a subtraction problem to an addition problem. That's going to give me the ability to treat this with the commutative property, and that's important in this particular problem because I happen to know 7/16 has a greater absolute value than 1/12. Because 7/16 is pretty close to 1/2, and 1/12 is nowhere near 1/2. So here I've already replaced the subtraction with addition, and I've made 7/16 negative. And then my next step will be to switch the positions of the two fractions, like I've done here. So now I'll be prepared to actually subtract the smaller amount from the larger amount. At this step, I'm going to try and find my least common denominator. And in order to do that, I'm going to use prime factorization. 16, when I use prime factorization, I get 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, which is 2 to the 4th. And 12, when it's prime factorized, I get 3 times 2 times 2, which is 2 squared times 3. Next, I'm going to invite all the bases to the party. So I'm going to have a base of 2 and a base of 3. And I want to have the base that's going to bring the most treats to the party come. And that happens to be 2 to the 4th. 2 to the 4th has more treats than 2 squared does. When I find the product of 2 to the 4th times 3, I get a total of 48. Now that I know my denominator will need to be 48, I'll go ahead and multiply both of those fractions, 7/16 by 3 over 3, again the equivalency of 1, and that'll give me a denominator of 48. And then 1/12, I'm going to multiply that by 4 over 4, again giving me a denominator of 8. Here I have the product of both of those expressions, and now I need to simply subtract the numerators. Again, the denominators are going to stay the same. So the sum of this is negative 17 over 48. So a few things to remember when adding or subtracting rational numbers. first you need to find the LCD, or least common denominator, when you have two fractions with unlike denominators. And then after you do that, you only add or subtract the numerator. The denominator will stay the same.